Shadow of doubt, Josephine Hayes stared at the stack of water sample reports scattered across her kitchen table. The lamplight casting long shadows over the data that had consumed her life for the past 8 months. At 42, she had spent nearly 2 decades as an environmental scientist in the sleepy coastal town of Osprey Cove, a place where everyone knew everyone nor at least thought they did. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the alarming chemical signatures in the laid samples. The pattern was unmistakable. Meridian Industries was dumping toxic waste into the watershed that supplied the town's drinking water. She'd been collecting evidence meticulously since noticing unusual algae blooms in Blackwater Creek, followed by reports of increasing illness in the community. "You're seeing ghosts again, Joe," her brother Thomas had said last week, the familiar mixture of concern and dismissal in his voice. "Remember your burnout 3 years ago? The doctor said stress can make you see patterns that aren't there." Winced at the memory. Yes, she'd suffered a breakdown after her divorce from Richard, Osprey Cove's most beloved physician. But this wasn't delusion. This was science. Evidence. The kitchen phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. She knew who it was before answering. "The town council meeting is tomorrow," Principal Eleanor Winters said without greeting. "Josephine is your friend. I'm begging you to reconsider. Meridian employs half the town. These accusations, they're not accusations, Ellie. They're findings," Josephine interrupted, her normally soft voice firm. "Children are getting sick. The hospital has reported a 40% increase in respiratory problems since the plant expanded." A weary sigh crackled through the receiver. "And Richard says there's no connection. He's examined most of those cases personally." Of course he had. Richard Harlow, her ex-husband, had always been quick to dismiss her concerns, especially when they threatened his comfortable relationship with Meridian's executives, who generously funded the hospital's new wing. "I'll see you tomorrow, Ellie," Josephine said quietly, hanging up before her friend could respond. The next evening, Josephine stood before the town council, her presentation meticulously prepared. The council members all respected figures in Osprey Cove, with expressions ranging from polite boredom to barely concealed hostility. "The contamination levels exceed EPA standards by nearly 300%, she explained, pointing to her charts. "I've documented steady increases correlating precisely with Meridian's production schedule." "The statistical significance is Dr. Hayes," interrupted Councilman Porter, glancing toward Richard, who sat in the front row. "We appreciate your enthusiasm. Dr. Harlow has assured us that the recent health concerns are simply seasonal allergies combined with an unusually potent flu strain." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the packed room. Josephine felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach, the sensation of being systematically undermined. "With all due respect," she persisted, "allergies don't explain the heavy metal concentrations I've found in these samples, or the fact that illness rates decrease significantly in households using bottled water exclusively." From the back, someone whispered loudly enough for all to hear, "She's still bitter about the divorce. This is personal, not scientific." Josephine's cheeks burned, but she continued, even as she watched eyes rolling and heads shaking. When the council voted unanimously to dismiss her findings, recommending she take some time off, the humiliation was complete. Outside in the cool evening air, Josephine clutched her research to her chest. Carolyn Zhang, her former research assistant, approached hesitantly. "I believe you," Caroline whispered, glancing around nervously. "I can't publicly support you. My husband works at Meridian, and with the baby coming, ... Josephine nodded, understanding all too well the impossible position her few remaining allies faced. As Carolyn walked away, Josephine noticed Richard watching from the council building steps, his handsome face set in an expression of practiced concern. "Joe," he called, approaching with the confident stride that had once made her heart race. "This has gone far enough. People are talking. They're calling you crazy," she finished for him, paranoid, vindictive. "I know what they're saying, Richard." His voice lowered. Loud. "Then why continue? For both our sakes, drop this before you damage what's left of your reputation." His hand brushed her arm in a gesture that once might have seemed caring, but now felt manipulative. Josephine stepped back. Because it's true. And someone has to protect this town event from itself. As she walked away, she didn't see Richard's expression harden, nor did she know that tomorrow morning she would be served with papers for a defamation lawsuit that would threaten everything she had left. The breaking point, the morning sun slanted through Josephine's kitchen window, illuminating the legal document that had arrived by courier just minutes ago. A defamation lawsuit. Meridian Industries was suing her for $5 million a sum. So astronomical it seemed almost comical until she realized they were deadly serious. She sank into her chair, scanning the dense legal text. The lawsuit claimed her malicious and unfounded allegations had caused irreparable harm to Meridian's reputation and business interests. It demanded not only damages, but a complete retraction and public apology. Her phone had been ringing incessantly since dawn. First Principal Winters, informing her that the school board had concerns about her continued employment at the community college where she taught environmental science part-time. Then her landlord, awkwardly explaining that perhaps it would be more comfortable for everyone if she found new housing when her lease expired next month. Even her brother Thomas had called, his voice tight with frustration. "What were you thinking, Joe, taking on Meridian? They practically own this town." "I was thinking about the truth," she had replied quietly. The silence that followed spoke volumes. Now 3 hours later, Josephine sat in the modest office of Gerald Hoffman, the only attorney in Osprey Cove who had agreed to meet with her. His expression was grim as he reviewed the lawsuit. "Dr. Hayes, I'll be frank. This isn't just a lawsuit, it's a message. They're making an example of you." The elderly lawyer removed his glasses, polishing them nervously. "Meridian has a team of corporate attorneys. I handle wills and property disputes. I'm simply not equipped for this kind of battle." "Then what am I supposed to do?" Josephine asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "My honest advice? Settle. Issue the retraction. It's the only way you'll survive this financially." Josephine stood abruptly and let them continue poisoning people. "I have evidence, Mr. Hoffman. Evidence. Requires experts to interpret it. Experts cost money," he sighed. "Money you don't have." She left his office with a heaviness in her chest that had become all too familiar. Walking along Main Street, she felt the stares of townspeople, some pitying, others judgmental, a few openly hostile. Outside the pharmacy, she overheard two women whispering, ... completely unhinged since the divorce. ... Always was odd, but this is beyond. ... Richard has been so patient with her. ... That evening, Josephine sat on her back porch, watching darkness settle over the town she'd called home for 20 years. Her phone buzzed with a text from Caroline. "I'm so sorry. We can't be seen communicating anymore." James was told he'd lose his job. One by one, the lights in her life were going out. The final blow came 3 days later. The community college board voted to place her on administrative leave. Her department head, Dr. Vernon Phillips, delivered the news with practiced sympathy. "It's just until this legal matter is resolved, Josephine. You understand our position?" She understood perfectly. Without her teaching income, she had no way to fight the lawsuit, no way to pay rent, no way to survive in a town that had decided she was either delusional or vindictive. That night, Josephine sat at her kitchen table surrounded by her research water samples. Charts, photographs, medical statistics she'd painstakingly gathered, all of it pointing to a truth no one wanted to hear. Tears blurred her vision as she began packing it away. Perhaps Thomas was right. Perhaps she should move to the city, start over somewhere people didn't know her as Richard's unstable ex-wife. A knock at her door startled her. It was nearly midnight. Warily she approached, peering through the peephole to see a tall man. In an expensive suit, his face partially shadowed, Dr. Hayes called a voice she didn't recognize. "My name is Marcus Wellington. I believe you have information that interests me greatly." Josephine hesitated, her hand on the deadbolt. "What kind of information?" "About Meridian Industries and their environmental practices. May I come in? I promise it's worth your time." Against her better judgment, Josephine opened the door. The man before her was striking tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair graying at the temples, sharp features, and penetrating blue eyes that seemed to assess everything in seconds. "You find me?" she asked, not moving from the doorway. "Your research on groundwater contamination patterns?" "I've been following similar cases across the country." He handed her a business card. The embossed text read, "Marcus Wellington, Senior Partner, Wellington and Associates, Environmental Litigation." "You're a lawyer," she said, immediately on guard. "Am," he nodded. "And I believe Meridian Industries is about to destroy you to protect themselves from a much larger liability." "Unless we stop them?" "We?" Josephine repeated skeptically. "I'd like to represent you, Dr. Hayes." His expression was impossible to read. "Pro bono. Why would you do that?" she asked, still blocking the entrance. Marcus Wellington's serious expression softened slightly. "Let's just say I have my reasons, and a personal interest in seeing justice done in Osprey Cove." Josephine studied him, weighing her desperation against her caution. Finally, she stepped aside. "You should know," she said as he entered, "that associating with me has become hazardous to one's social and professional health in this town." For the first time, Marcus Wellington smiled a brief, sharp expression that transformed his face. "Fortunately, Dr. Hayes, I've never much cared what small towns think of me. Now, show me everything you have." As she led him to her research-covered table, Josephine felt something she hadn't experienced in months, the faintest flicker of hope. An unexpected alyssum light streamed through the dusty windows of the motel room that had become Josephine's temporary home. After being served an eviction notice technically legal but suspiciously rushed, she'd been forced to relocate to the Osprey in the only establishment in town willing to house her. The once spacious dining table of her cottage had been replaced by a wobbly desk covered with carefully organized folders and sample vials. Across from her sat Marcus Wellington. His tailored jacket hung precisely over the back of a chair, sleeves of his crisp, white shirt rolled up to the elbows as he examined her research with methodical intensity. For 3 days they had worked almost continuously, breaking only 4 brief meals and a few hours of sleep. "Your documentation is remarkably thorough," Marcus commented, reviewing her meticulous records of hospital admissions.
"Oh."
"Most people wouldn't have made these connections." "Most people weren't looking," Josephine replied simply. She studied him as he worked, still uncertain why this polished, obviously powerful attorney had appeared in her life at its lowest point. Marcus Wellington was a contradiction, ruthlessly efficient, yet occasionally distant, as though part of him remained elsewhere. He spoke little about himself, deflecting personal questions with practiced ease. "You never explained how you found me," Josephine ventured, "organizing water sample reports by date." Marcus didn't look up from the documents. "I make it my business to track certain corporations. Meridian has a pattern of establishing operations in small towns with limited resources. To challenge them. That doesn't explain why you're helping me specifically," she pressed. His blue eyes finally met hers, something unreadable flickering in their depths. "Perhaps I have a personal interest in seeing justice served in Osprey Cove." Before she could probe further, his phone rang, a call from his office in Boston. As he stepped outside to take it, Josephine's curiosity got the better of her. She opened her laptop and searched his name. The results were impressive. Marcus Wellington, founding partner of Wellington and Associates, specialized in environmental litigation. Harvard Law, undefeated in class action suits against major corporations. Known for being ruthlessly effective and intensely private.
"Oh."
No personal details, no social media presence, no interviews, just case victories and professional accolades. When he returned, she closed her laptop quickly, feeling oddly guilty. "Tomorrow," Marcus announced, "we're visiting some of the affected families. I need first-hand accounts to supplement your data." The next morning, they drove through neighborhoods Josephine hadn't dared visit since the lawsuit began. At each home, the pattern was similar: initial wariness, then recognition of Marcus's authority. Finally, cautious sharing of health concerns they'd been too afraid to voice publicly at the modest home of the Peterson family, whose 10-year-old daughter had developed severe respiratory problems. Marcus displayed a gentleness that surprised Josephine. He sat patiently with young Lily, Was listening to her describe the bad air days when she couldn't play outside, his usual sharp demeanor softening noticeably. People are scared, Josephine observed as they drove away. Meridian employs half the town fears a powerful silencer, Marcus agreed, but it only takes a few brave voices to break it. That afternoon they visited the local cemetery. Josephine watched, puzzled, as Marcus stopped before a simple headstone. Elizabeth Wellington. Beloved mother, 1947 to 1989. You had family here, realized aloud, the pieces suddenly connecting. Marcus remained silent, his expression distant. As he stared at the grave, You're from Osprey Cove, Josephine continued softly. That's why you're helping me. I left when I was 18, he finally said, his voice carefully controlled. My mother worked at the original Meridian plant. Died of unexplained pulmonary complications. The company paid a small settlement, enough to keep a struggling single mother's son from asking questions. I'm sorry, Josephine said, understanding dawning. How long have you been planning this? 27 years? His expression hardened. I've been watching Meridian's activities across the country, building expertise, waiting for the right moment. When I saw your findings published in that small environmental journal Findings, no one else would touch. Knew it was time. As they walked back to the car, Josephine processed this revelation. So I'm just part of your revenge plan. Marcus stopped, turning to face her. At first, perhaps, but after reviewing your research, speaking with these families, what? He hesitated. Seemingly uncomfortable with the admission, this is about justice now, not just personal vendetta. Later that evening, as they worked in the motel room, a sharp knock interrupted them. Josephine opened the door to find Richard standing there, his handsome face set in lines of practiced concern. Joe, we need to talk, he said, then noticed Marcus behind her. His expression changed instantly. Who's this? Marcus stepped forward, extending his hand with deliberate courtesy. Marcus Wellington, Dr. Hayes's attorney. Richard's face paled. Slightly Wellington? From Boston? You've heard of me? I'm flattered. Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. Joe, can we speak privately? Richard asked, his voice tightening. Anything you have to say can be said in front of my counsel, Josephine replied. Finding unexpected strength in Marcus's solid presence beside her, Richard's affable mask slipped. Be reasonable. Meridian is offering a settlement. Drop the allegations. Sign a non-disclosure agreement, and this all goes away. You can have your life back. My life, Josephine repeated incredulously. You mean the life where I ignore children getting sick? Where I pretend not to see the evidence right in front? Of me. You don't understand what you're up against, Richard hissed, glancing nervously at Marcus. I believe she understands perfectly, Marcus interjected smoothly. And we'll see you in court, Dr. Harlow. After Richard left, Josephine turned to find Marcus watching her with something like admiration. That was your opportunity to walk away, he observed. Many would have taken it. Josephine shook her head. I can't be bought. Not with my reputation, not with my peace of mind. For the first time, Marcus smiled, genuinely a transformation that momentarily took her breath away. Then we have more in common than I thought, Dr. Hayes. He returned to the document spread across the desk. Now, let's prepare for war. As Josephine resumed her work, she realized something had shifted between them, a newfound respect perhaps, or something deeper neither was ready to acknowledge. Battle in the courtroom. The Osprey Cove County Courthouse hadn't seen such a crowd in decades. By 8 in the morning, every wooden bench in the gallery was filled with spectators spilling into the hallway. The air hummed with tension and whispered, speculation. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Whitman. Josephine stood. Her charcoal gray suit, purchased specifically for the trial at Marcus's insistence, a stark contrast to her usual practical attire. Beside her, Marcus cut an imposing figure, his presence commanding attention even in silence. Across the aisle sat Meridian's legal team, 5 attorneys in identical dark suits. Led by Lawrence Barrett, a corporate defense lawyer with a national reputation for ruthlessness. Beside them, Richard sat with Meridian CEO Howard Reynolds, both men radiating confident disdain. Quite the circus they've assembled, Marcus murmured as they took their seats. They want to intimidate us, Josephine replied quietly. A common strategy when facing opponents they underestimate, he said with the faintest hint of a smile. Barrett's opening statement was masterfully crafted, painting Meridian as a benevolent, corporate citizen providing jobs and prosperity, while characterizing Josephine as a vindictive ex-wife with a personal vendetta and questionable mental stability. Dr. Hayes' accusations are not merely false, they're malicious, Barrett concluded, his voice ringing through the courtroom. Her reckless claims have threatened hundreds of jobs and damaged a company that has faithfully served this community for generations. When Marcus rose to deliver their opening statement, the whispers ceased. Josephine watched the transformation with fascination. Gone was any trace of the private, sometimes distant man she'd come to know. In his place stood a legal predator, controlled yet unmistakably dangerous. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began, his voice measured and compelling. This case is about one thing: truth. Truth that has been deliberately buried. Truth that has been silenced through intimidation, through character assassination, and now through legal manipulation. He moved away from the podium, commanding the space with practiced ease. We will prove that Meridian Industries has knowingly contaminated this community's water supply with toxic chemicals. We will prove they falsified environmental reports. We will prove they deliberately concealed evidence of health impacts. And we will prove that when Dr. Josephine Hayes, a respected environmental scientist, covered their deception, they orchestrated a campaign to destroy her rather than address the poison they've released into your community. The first day proceeded with expert witnesses from both sides presenting contradictory interpretations of Josephine's data. Barrett's strategy became clear. A clear attack. Her credibility, not her science. Each witness from Meridian subtly reinforced the narrative that her findings were skewed by personal bias. By day 3, the strain was showing. Josephine had endured hours of testimony from former colleagues who now claimed she had always exhibited concerning tendencies toward obsession. The community had divided into factions, with protesters both supporting and condemning her gathering outside the courthouse daily. On the 4th day, Barrett called Richard to the stand. Josephine felt her stomach twist as her ex-husband testified with practiced compassion about her fragile mental state following their divorce. And in your professional opinion as her physician, could Dr. Hayes' findings be influenced by this? Fragility? Barrett asked. Objection? Marcus was on his feet instantly. Dr. Harlow was never qualified as an expert in psychiatric evaluation. His prior relationship with the defendant represents a clear conflict of interest. Sustained, Judge Whitman ruled. The jury will disregard the question. But the damage had been done. Josephine could see it in the jurors' faces. Doubt had been planted. That evening, in their makeshift war room at the motel, Josephine finally broke down. They're winning, she said, her voice hollow. No matter what evidence we present, they've successfully made this about me, not about the contamination. Marcus paused in his review of documents. That's precisely why tomorrow we change the narrative.
How?
She asked, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. We've been playing defense. Tomorrow, we go on the attack. His expression hardened. Barrett made a critical mistake today. He opened the door for us to introduce evidence of Meridian's past environmental violations. The next morning, Marcus called his first surprise witness, Dominic Reeves, a former Meridian environmental compliance officer who had been quietly flown in overnight. Mr. Reeves, what was your role at Meridian Industries? Marcus asked. I oversaw environmental compliance at 3 Meridian facilities from 2012 to 2019, Reeves replied, his discomfort evident. And during that time, were you ever instructed to alter test results for chemical discharge reports? Barrett was on his feet. Objection. Relevance. Your Honor, Marcus countered smoothly. The plaintiff has put Dr. Hayes' credibility at issue. We're entitled to present evidence regarding Meridian's credibility in environmental reporting. I'll allow it, Judge Whitman ruled. Proceed, Mr. Wellington. What followed was devastating testimony. Reeves detailed systematic falsification of environmental reports, scribed internal memos acknowledging contamination issues, and confirmed that executives had discussed the acceptable risk of potential health impacts versus the cost of proper waste management. During a recess, Josephine watched Reynolds and Richard in intense conversation with Barrett, their expressions grim. "They're worried," she observed. "They should be," Marcus replied. "But our strongest evidence comes this afternoon." After lunch, Marcus called Josephine to the stand. She took the oath. She felt the weight of every stare in the courtroom. "Dr. Hayes," Marcus began, his tone respectful yet formal, "please explain to the court your qualification in environmental toxicology." With calm precision, Josephine outlined her credentials, her doctorate from MIT, her research publications, her consulting work for the EPA. As she spoke, she felt her confidence returning. "And what specifically led you to investigate Blackwater Creek's water quality?" "In February last year, I noticed unusual algae formations consistent with chemical contamination. This coincided with an increase in respiratory complaints at the elementary school located downstream." For nearly 2 hours, Marcus guided her through her findings, methodically dismantling Barrett's narrative. Instead of a woman scorned, the jury saw a meticulous scientist following evidence to its logical conclusion. The climax came when Marcus presented sealed documents obtained through Discovery internal Meridian communications that Josephine had never seen. "Dr. Hayes, please read the highlighted portion of this email from CEO Howard Reynolds to the Board of Directors. It's dated March 15th of last year." Josephine's voice was steady as she read. "The Hayes situation requires immediate containment. Her water testing continues. Our liability exposure could exceed $200 million in remediation and damages. Dr. Harlow assures me he can manage his ex-wife's credibility issues. Recommend authorizing whatever resources necessary to ensure this matter remains contained." A shocked murmur rippled through the courtroom. Reynolds' face had gone ashen. During cross-examination, Barrett attempted to recover, pressing Josephine about her personal life and suggesting emotional instability, but the dynamic had shifted. Attack now seemed desperate rather than authoritative. "Isn't it true that you were prescribed anti-anxiety medication following your divorce?" Barrett demanded. "Yes," Josephine replied calmly. "I saw it appropriate. Treatment for situational anxiety following a difficult personal transition. This demonstrates my commitment to mental health, not instability." By the time she stepped down, even Barrett seemed to realize the tide had turned. The final blow came. During Marcus's closing argument, "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice resonating through the hushed courtroom, "this case began as an attempt to silence one person who dared speak truth to power. But it has become something much more, a referendum on whether we allow corporations to poison our communities with impunity." He moved closer to the jury box, his intensity palpable. "You've seen the evidence. You've heard the testimony. You've witnessed Meridian's own documents confirming they knew about the contamination and chose profit over people's health. The question now is simple. Will you stand with truth, or will you submit to intimidation?" As Marcus returned to his seat, his hand briefly touched Josephine's shoulder. Gesture of solidarity that didn't go unnoticed by the watchful courtroom. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning their verdict. "We find in favor of the defendant, Dr. Josephine Hayes, on all counts." The courtroom erupted. Through tears of relief, Josephine turned to Marcus, whose composed expression had finally cracked to reveal genuine emotion. "Thank you," she whispered, the simple words inadequate for all he had done. "This is just the beginning," he replied, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "Tomorrow, we file our countersuit. Meridian's reckoning has only just begun." Beyond victory, 6 months after the verdict, Osprey Cove was transformed. The courthouse steps where Josephine had once stood alone were now the site of a press conference announcing Meridian Industries' historic settlement. $350 million for environmental remediation, medical monitoring for affected residents, and establishment of a community health foundation. Josephine stood slightly back from the microphone as Marcus addressed the crowd of journalists, community members, an environmental activist who had traveled from across the country to witness this unprecedented victory. Today marks not an ending, but a beginning, Marcus stated, his commanding presence holding the audience rapt. The beginning of corporate accountability, the beginning of environmental justice, and most importantly, a beginning of healing for this community. Camera flashes illuminated his face as he continued, outlining the comprehensive cleanup plan that would restore Blackwater Creek and the surrounding watershed. The settlement, 10 times larger than any previous environmental case in the state, had sent shockwaves through the chemical industry. With stocks plummeting, as investors questioned which corporation might be the next target of Wellington and Associates. As Marcus fielded questions, Josephine observed the faces in the crowd. Many were the same people who had once whispered about her instability, who had crossed to the other side of the street to avoid her. Now they gazed at her with something between admiration and awe, transformation almost as remarkable as the legal victory itself. Among them stood her brother Thomas, who had tearfully apologized the day after the verdict. "I should have believed you," he had said, embracing her for the first time in months. "I'm so sorry, Joe." She had forgiven him, along with most of the others who had abandoned her. Resentment, she discovered, required energy she preferred to direct elsewhere, the press conference concluded. And as the crowd dispersed, Josephine and Marcus walked toward the waterfront park that overlooked the Knocklows Meridian facility. Construction equipment stood ready to begin the demolition and remediation process the following week. "They're calling you the Environmental Avenger now," Josephine remarked, nodding toward a newspaper headline. "Your firm has received 28 new cases since our verdict." 29, as of this morning, Marcus corrected with a slight smile. Apparently there's no shortage of corporate malfeasance to address. They reached a bench overlooking the water and sat in comfortable silence. Over the intense months of preparation, trial, and aftermath, their relationship had evolved into something neither had anticipated: a partnership of equals, built on mutual respect and a shared passion for justice, and perhaps something more, though neither had yet found the words to define it. "I received an offer from State University's Environmental Sciences Department," Josephine said finally. "Full professorship, with funding for a research center focused on community-based environmental monitoring." "You'd be exceptional at that," Marcus replied, genuinely pleased for her. "When would you start?" "September." She hesitated, studying his profile. "It's in Boston." Something flickered in his expression: surprise, followed by what might have been hope. "A considerable improvement over Osprey Cove Community College," he observed carefully. "I thought so." Josephine paused, gathering her courage. "Marcus, these past months working with you, they've changed me. Changed how I see myself, my future." He turned to face her fully, his customary reserve softening. "They've changed me as well. When I came to Osprey Cove 20 years ago, I thought I was building a life. But looking back, I realized I was just existing, going through motions, accepting limitations, compromising on things I shouldn't have." She met his gaze directly. "I don't want to just exist anymore." "What do you want, Josephine?" he asked, quietly. "To build something meaningful. To continue making a difference." She took a deep breath. "And I'd like to explore what might be possible, between us." For a moment, Marcus was silent, his expression unreadable. Then he reached for her hand, his touch surprisingly gentle for a man known for his intensity. "When I returned to Osprey Cove, I came seeking vengeance," he admitted. "For my mother, for the years of carrying that unresolved anger. I never expected to find something worth staying for, someone who would remind me that justice is about more than punishment. It's about restoration. It's about building something better from the ruins." He stood, drawing her up with him, their hands still joined. "I believe we have more work to do together, Dr. Hayes, both professionally and personally." As they walked along the shoreline, Josephine noticed a group of children playing near the water, something that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago, when the creek had been cordoned off as a health hazard. Among them was Lily Peterson. Her respiratory issues noticeably improved since the remediation efforts began. "Dr. Hayes," the girl called, waving enthusiastically. Look what we found! She held up a small container with tiny aquatic creatures swimming inside. Josephine knelt to examine the child's discovery. Freshwater shrimp, she identified with delight. They're incredibly sensitive to pollution. Their presence means that water quality is improving. It's like the canary in the coal mine, but in reverse, Marcus commented. Exactly. Josephine smiled at the children gathered around. These little creatures are telling us the ecosystem is healing. Later that evening, Josephine and Marcus sat on the porch of her newly purchased cottage place. She had chosen, not out of necessity but desire, a symbol of her commitment to seeing Osprey Cove's transformation through to completion. I've been thinking about your move to Boston, Marcus said, sipping the herbal tea she had prepared. My firm has been considering opening a satellite office focused specifically on environmental justice cases, perhaps somewhere midway between Boston and here. That sounds strategic, Josephine replied, hiding a smile. Purely from a business perspective, of course. Purely, he agreed, the warmth in his eyes belying his serious tone. Though I should note that this particular strategic decision might be influenced by certain personal considerations, such as the fact that I find myself increasingly reluctant to contemplate a future that doesn't include our regular debates over scientific methodology versus legal strategy. His voice softened. Or your tendency to correct my admittedly limited understanding of biochemical processes. Or the way you've reminded me that pursuing justice doesn't have to harden one's heart. Josephine felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the evening air, so as do seem like relevant considerations. From inside, the phone rang, another journalist seeking comment. Or perhaps another community requesting their help with a suspected contamination case. There had been dozens of such calls in recent weeks. We should probably answer that, Josephine said, though neither moved. It can wait, Marcus replied, reaching for her hand. I believe we were in the middle of negotiating terms for a long-term partnership. Were we? And what would those terms entail? She asked, her voice light, despite the sudden quickening of her heart. Full equality, shared purpose, mutual respect. His fingers interlaced with hers. And perhaps the opportunity to discover what happens when two people who never expected to find each other decide to build something together. Those terms seem acceptable, Jose murmured as he drew her closer, as the sun set over Osprey Cove, casting golden light across the healing waters of Blackwater Creek. Josephine Hayes, once dismissed, once isolated, once labeled unstable, found herself at the beginning of an unexpected chapter, not just vindicated, but truly seen, not just respected, but valued for exactly who she was. And Marcus Wellington, who had returned seeking vengeance, discovered that justice could heal old wounds in ways he had never imagined, not just for a community, but for his own long-guarded heart. In the distance, construction equipment stood ready to dismantle the physical remnants of Meridian Industries. But the true reconstruction had already begun, of a town of lives touched by courage, and of two people who had found in each other the strength to stand against impossible odds and emerge victorious. The path ahead would not be easy. Other battles awaited, other communities needed their combined expertise. But tonight, in this moment of quiet connection, they allowed themselves to simply be present in the victory they had created together, a victory that transcended courtrooms and settlements to touch something far more personal and profound. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tonight was for beginnings.